Symmetry, unbalanced and unrefined.
Yeah, the statement is about we're in a fatherless society and the role of men. And I can't tell you how honored I've been to work with so many wonderful men in this whole process. And I should take this moment to give a shout out to our legal team. Because lawyers get a broad rap. I was meeting with some great law students today, and I can tell you that this case would not have happened without them. And they are all volunteering their time. And they all say, you know why I'm doing it? Because I've got kids, and I would want someone to do this for my kid. And we've had dads show up with their children at Have a Heart Day. We've had dads volunteer to drive kids to different things. This has been a family affair. And I think that's what's been so uplifting for me, is I see people of every single culture and diversity, and people are standing together. Not for something that's important to the government, but because there's something fundamentally important about being human and people want to be part of doing the right thing. So by taking action and showing that, what these little kids are seeing, these little boys and girls, is they're seeing men and women of all different diversities taking action and showing that you can make a difference. And you don't have to be afraid of the government. You got to talk right to them. Yeah, this whole issue of getting legal representation for families is really a huge problem too, right? Once you get into the system or have a family member in the system, it's really hard, first of all, to understand the system, and second of all, to get representation so that you can be a part of the system in the benefit of the child. I don't have a solution for you, but I'd recommend, if you haven't talked to the children's representative here in BC, that you do. And I think Adrian, or these ladies here, would have the phone number for you. It'd be a toll-free number. And they may be able to connect you up with some resources on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, right there. These two here. They're from a great organization, by the way, called First Call. And go on and check out what they do, because they do a lot of great advocacy for kids here in BC. And we also have the Indigenous Perspective Society here in BC too. I don't know if anyone's here from there tonight, but they're here and they do some great work. Is that you, Linda, in the back? No? Okay. I think you're talking about the lawsuit that's been filed by Marcia Brown. She's taking the lead. She was a 60 Scoop survivor herself. There's a class action that's been certified in Ontario. And I think it's a very personal decision for people to make about whether it's the right thing for you to join it. It is a good legal action, though, because what Marcia is saying is that really my culture and my identity and my childhood was taken from me. And you can see the inequalities. These date back a long time, right? So these were in place. Now, we don't know for any given child, had these inequalities not been there, had they not gone into child welfare care. But we can likely say many would not have. So I would definitely have the conversation with the legal team. I know it's Jeffrey Wilson who's leading that case up. And also Marcia is a fantastic person. And if you can reach out to her and have a conversation with her, I think she'd be really honest about what her experience has been in the process. And I want to thank you for your strength in kind of standing up for this, because it's people like you and residential school survivors. When I look at this generation of kids, I don't want them to have to make the choice you're making. You know? Yeah. And I think with everyone sending that message in whatever way they can, and I always say to people, doing something doesn't have to cost money. In fact, just about everything we do at the Caring Society is free to do. We have 7 free things to do on our website. You can pray, that helps, seriously. You can talk to your friends and neighbors. You can think about making decisions like you're doing, which is holding the government accountable for the experiences you had in your family, or getting legal action to help your extended family members in the process. So yeah, there's a website. I can give you the contact information for Jeffrey Wilson if you want to touch base with him. He's the lawyer for the case. Welcome. Well, I really say that we in the NGO sector, I think, have a responsibility to take these cases forward. And that will mean that we'll have to collectively have a lot more courage, because There is lots of sanctions and restrictions being put around charities and nonprofit organizations to not speak out. I think as a democratic nation, every Canadian has an interest in making sure that those things are not there. They don't need to be there. Why would we want to stifle an organization from bringing a challenge? If it's not legitimate, the courts will throw it out. If it is legitimate, maybe it's something that would shape a better Canada. And so all I can say is that what we've tried to do at the Caring Society is identify that big core issue that if it was tackled, this inequality, could make substantial progress possible. And we were prepared to risk our organization in doing it. And we have, basically. There's only 3 of us at the Caring Society. But I think what it takes is the courage to do it. You just got to file that thing, do a lot of prayer, and work directly with the people who are affected throughout the entire case. Because this case is not the Caring Society's case. This is a case of every caring Canadian who believes about fairness and every First Nations person across this country. That's who this case belongs to. And so I'd like to see a lot more NGOs bringing representative complaints because I think individual complaints are too onerous. Within the legal profession, I know there's a lot of discourse about access to justice. I'd like to see some actually legal challenges, more of them, I guess, around that whole process. Why is it that the court challenges program could just evaporate federally? And there's really no reaction amongst the public. I don't know what reaction there was in the legal community, but almost no reaction amongst the public. And so somehow we have to get people sensitized to these issues that say, really, if you want to play an active role as a citizen, if you want to build a better Canada, there has to be supports for you to do that at the individual and systemic levels. Well, I'm not a lawyer. What I will say, though, I'll take that opportunity to say, we haven't got the ruling from the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal, but I will say publicly it's been a fair process. And that means a lot. The kid's story has been told. And I believe these people have fairly asked challenging questions of us and asked challenging questions of the federal government. And so we have gone up all the way to the Federal Court of Appeal. And I think what I've seen, and this is just as a person, not as any kind of professional, so take this as a grain of salt, if you like. But I think successive governments have tried to appoint people with their political persuasion. But I actually think a lot of these people who, when they get on the bench, know what's wrong and right, and will make decisions that aren't necessarily based on their political views, but based on their reading of the law. And I think that's what we've seen out of the Supreme Court lately. And I think it really calls on all of us as citizens to really embrace this division of powers. We don't want a federal government that's running amok, doing all kinds of things without any check system. It's really important that we all stand up when we see, for example, this calling out of the Supreme Court Chief Justice. The reason that that's so dangerous is because that's the accountability and balance mechanism for Parliament. And so we have to keep our eye on this democracy and freedom thing. And I'm really worried that we're at a stage in the world right now where we're more apt to give freedom and equality away than we are to have it taken from us. We're a scaredy cat kind of population right now. And because we're scared, we allow the governments to pile on more powers. And while some of those are necessary, I don't think they're all necessary. And I think we're living in a society now that is more unequal. And there is more Big Brother activity happening than when I was born in the 1960s and we're worried about this kind of stuff coming into Canada. I really think it is here now, but we're doing it to ourselves. The one good thing is you can see that there's lots of solutions First Nations have already came up with. And you need to ask how you can be invited into the process of making that happen. So one of my great elders and teachers told me when I started this job, because I was really nervous, because I have screwed up culturally at different First Nations across the country, because they're so culturally diverse. Thankfully, they are very forgiving, and they just use it to laugh at me when I go back and visit their community. But I think the real thing is to say is, I want to be respectful, can you please guide me? The other thing is you have to accept your own responsibility for learning. Don't rely on First Nations people to teach you about the history of the country. You have to accept that responsibility yourself. And the third thing I'd say to any social worker, and I think it's unfortunately sadly lacking in our profession, is having the moral courage to do the right thing. We don't ask social workers to be courageous. And if we do, we are not there to support them. And I think courage has got to be one of the fundamental things that social workers do. Because our job is not, in my view, to do family therapy. Our job is to challenge those structures and those powerful blockades that stop people from living fully as they wish to live. And those blockades, the headwaters, are amongst the most powerful people in a country. So if you are not courageous, and if you're not prepared to sacrifice something, then you should not get into social work. Because I think it is really an honor and a privilege, an absolute honor and a privilege that I hope to earn every single day, to work with these children and with First Nations and non-Aboriginal Canadians to deal with this issue in a way that not only helps First Nations peoples, but builds a better Canada. But in doing that, we've had to sacrifice a lot. And the way that it made it easier, by the way, is knowing what your values are. You absolutely need to live by values. People have said I'm very courageous, right? Because I've been under surveillance and everything else with this. I said, no, I'm not courageous. I have just learned it's a lot easier to live with courage than it is to live with fear. And if I have also, at this stage of my life, realized that the thing I value the most in my life is not my 10-year-old car in my garage, or even my fashions, which I love, but it is my values. And I also realized in that moment that only I could give them away. No one could take them from me. I could give them away. And it's very easy to do it. You get tired. They're playing low ball. They're spying on you, doing all these things. But you never fight on their low ground. You live by principle. And if you do that, there's nothing they can take away from you. And you can be as courageous as the people that you're going to be honored to work with. Because those are the real courageous people out there. It's those 163,000 kids who are going to bed tonight. Those are the real heroes, not people like you and I. It's about surveillance and what do you do about it. And so in my situation, for people who don't know, is the federal government was on my personal Facebook page. They followed me to events. They would note when I was not at places. So they would say, this is happening and she's not here. They have notes of a talk I did in the middle of the desert of Australia. So there's lots of this stuff happening, and it's all in government documents. That's how I can base it off, because I've got the emails and everything. So what I remember when I opened that DVD, I got it through Access to Information is how I found out, and I was shocked. I could not believe it. My first reaction was absolutely stunned. Like I thought this would only happen to somebody who was actually breaking the law, right? Why would they be following me around? You know, I don't even have a parking ticket, let alone a criminal record. What was all the interest in me? And to see, you get these comments from people like, you know, girls on a roll, that kind of stuff. And you don't even know who these people are. In my case, it was 189 separate federal officials that were involved in the surveillance. And of course, the Privacy Commissioner made a finding that it was unlawful. For a while, I had to sit on it to decide what I was going to do, because at the time I had a teenager living in my house, and I was thinking, what am I going to do with this, right? Are they watching him? Like, what's going on here? But I realized that I'm going to do two things. Number one is I'm not going to fight on their low ground. And that all I'm going to do is shine a light on this process, a big light. And so I went on CBC The Current and talked about it. And I refused to name the bureaucrats, which I've refused to do up until this day. I will not betray their privacy in an attempt to try and uphold my own. I will not put them in an awkward situation with their families because I feel angry or hurt. So I just shine a bright light on it is my advice. The second is there are places you can go. If the federal government or any government has violated your privacy, you can make a complaint with the Privacy Commissioner. In my case, the human rights complaint was amended to include an allegation of retaliation. I'm entitled to a financial award. I've asked for that financial award, but I've said in the legal documents I'm not personally taking the money. I'm donating it all to children's charities because it's not about the money. It's about the principle of being able to speak out in an honest way in a democratic society about justice. So those are the things that you have to, that's what I decided to do. Thank you. And you know what, with what happened to me, I don't want that to be the news story. That is not the news story. The news story is the courage of these kids and these families and the courageous people who have stood with them to rectify this injustice. And in some ways, I actually feel okay about it. I think about Gandhi. Wasn't it him who said, first they laugh at you, which they did for a long time. Some of you, Steve is in the audience. You remember the days when they were laughing at us, Steve. And then first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. Can I just ask, how many people here are going to sign up for FN Witness? Great. You know what, that's the greatest thank you you can give me is by spreading the message about this. And when the ruling comes out, follow us on Twitter. We're at Caring Society. That's how we're going to announce this ruling. And when you see that tweet come out, please send it out to everybody in your circle. And the other thing I'd ask you to do is please have celebrations with your children. Because when this decision comes out and we build a better Canada together, we should all celebrate it together. We've had enough days of saying sorry. Let's make this a happy day where we're building a better future, and let's make darn sure the government implements the decision. Thank you all so very, very much.